Peace, love, liberty, radio.
And the walls come crashing down as the war at home reaches your town. You have no choice, it's safe and clean. We all submit to the war machine.
So I'm going to begin the show with a rant. And it's not really a rant against any person in particular. Rather, like, it's a rant against myself, if anything. So yesterday, I was uploading some files for the audiobook of A Rebel's Journey. And what I was doing was uploading to where I can actually have the audiobook on CD. And it's going to be a mildly abridged version. And the only reason that I have to abridge what goes on the CD is because of time constraints of how much audio one can fit onto a CD. And the actual audiobook is about 4 minutes longer than the amount of audio that will fit on a CD. And I didn't want to have a second disc for about 4.5 minutes of audio. So I had to go through and make a few minor edits, like, things that are not important. Like, here, I can take out this minute of audio here, and it doesn't really change the flow of the book. And unless you're reading the book, you won't really realize that anything is missing from the mildly abridged version. So I'm getting these files edited and formatted and compressed and put into a zip and then uploading, and I keep getting this error of you need to have the same number of tracks as files and this and something, and I was like, what's going on? So I saw a thing, it said, add 10 more tracks, and I didn't need 10 more tracks, I needed 2, but anyway, I went ahead, all right, so add 10 and then upload, and it's still saying incorrect. And so then I compressed it down, merged a couple of the chapters and got it to 10 files and uploaded that, and it still told me error. And then I realized, oh, wait a second, I need to put names in the way this online form was, you uploaded the file in one area and then you named your tracks somewhere else. I thought it was going to automatically name the tracks after I uploaded the file, so I spent, I don't know, maybe 3 more hours trying to upload this thing than what I really should have. But now that I've got it uploaded, I accidentally hit a button that now makes it to where I can't edit until the company winds up saying everything's good, and then I can say, no, I want to now edit. So what I'm going to do, and I'm glad that I've set the release date for A Rebel's Journey in September. That way it gives me time to work out kinks and all of this and whatnot. So the book will be available September 15th. The ebook is available for pre-order. There will be 2 versions of the audiobook. There will be a version that is for download that will be available audible.com, Amazon, and iTunes. And then there will be an actual physical CD version of the audiobook that I'm guessing you'll be able to buy from Amazon and probably, any bookstore that is connected in through the Amazon system. So you will be able to buy, physical things as well as digital. And again, that is September 15th. I just thought it was kind of funny that, I wasted so much time trying to re-upload these files. And well, at first, when I uploaded the file, I was uploading MP3s, and I thought that was the problem because the company calls for AIFF files, which is some Apple encoding. And I was like, oh, okay, so I had the wrong files. Let me change them, and maybe that's the problem. No, I just didn't put names in the tracks. So in a few days I'll be able to do that. And I've actually hired somebody to do the actual ebook formatting. Now, that with ebooks, there's several different ways that you can do this, to where Amazon can take just like a Word document and format it, but it's not the proper formatting, if you will. So the table of contents doesn't work when Amazon does the formatting for you. So I'm paying somebody to actually do that formatting so the table of contents will work and everything else. And it's going to be really great. And I'll be entering the book into a few book award competitions, thanks to the wonderful people that donated through the fundraiser. And yes, donors, your perks, which is the ebook and the audiobook, that will be delivered before September 15th. I just have to wait on a couple of things to where the physical book will be ready so that people that bought copies of the physical book, they can get proof copies of the book before it's available. So, like all of that stuff will be done hopefully by the end of August, if not the first week of September. So let me now jump into the news that I wanted to cover. And it's actually slightly older news, but it just came across my radar within like the last 2 days. And one of these stories is sort of tangentially related. So I'll cover the first story first, and then the next story explains why the first story will never happen, if that makes any sense. So the first story comes from Breitbart, and it's titled, Pollster Pat Cadell says 1/3 of GOP hanging by a thread from bolting. So basically the claim here is that about 1 out of every 3 people that's a Republican or Republican voter is hanging by a thread. Like they're preparing to leave the Republican Party. But I don't think that will happen, and I'll explain after reading this story, I'll explain why it will never happen. Or at least if it does happen, it will not be within the next couple of years. It will have to, have some sort of like global shift of politics in the U.S. So again, this story comes from Breitbart, and the story begins, Fox News contributor and Democratic pollster Pat Cadell told Breitbart News Executive Chairman Stephen K. Bannon that up to 1/3 of Republicans are ready to call it quits as members of the GOP. Cadell said, the alienation among Republican voters is so high, between 1/4 and 1/3 of the Republican Party are hanging by a thread from bolting. He argues that GOP voters' attitudes are so anti-establishment that they give Republican leadership poor ratings. The revelation comes on the heels of polling data supervised by Cadell Associates and reported on, it says on Friday, but this story actually came from January of this year. So it was reported earlier this year that a stupefying 60% of Republicans who voted in the November elections either definitely or probably want someone other than John Boehner to be Speaker of the House. There's more explaining why Republicans are upset with the Republican Party, and then I'll tell you why they'll never leave the Republican Party. Stay tuned to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio.
Coinbase is a simple and secure online Bitcoin wallet for sending, receiving, and storing Bitcoin. Coinbase also allows you to buy and sell Bitcoin using a bank account or use their tools to accept Bitcoin as a merchant. Opening a wallet is quick and easy, and for merchants, there are no transaction fees on the first $1 million worth of transactions. Get started at coinbase.fppradio.com. When her plush and comfy life suddenly and unexpectedly fell apart, Brooke and her dog Cloud set out to defy the odds. If this is a man's world, as they say, living on the streets is no place for a young woman. One day she awoke in the redwood forest and realized she had become a hobo, and would ultimately come to know exactly what it means to survive. How to Be a Hobo by Brooke Willett is available from Amazon.com and all major bookstores. You can support FPP Radio by shopping online. Whether you're looking for precious metals, bitcoins, or books, you'll find that and more at shop.fppradio.com. Every purchase you make from one of my affiliates, like Namecheap, ExpressCoin, and Amazon, at shop.fppradio.com helps fund FPP Radio. Or you can shop directly from FPP with Bitcoin in the Bitcoin store. That's shop.fppradio.com.
You're listening to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio with Darryl W. Perry.
So before I finish telling you the reasons why some Republicans are upset with the Republican Party, and then telling you why they'll never leave, I want to tell you about something that, if you use Bitcoin, will make you incredibly happy. Have you ever been, thinking like, I want to buy something and I want to pay with Bitcoin, but not knowing where to go? Well, wouldn't it be wonderful if there was a website that you could go to that would list millions of products from thousands of Bitcoin accepting merchants? Well, now there is. It's Spendabit. Spendabit.co. It's a search engine of sorts for Bitcoin accepting merchants and Bitcoin products. So you go in, you type in the name of a product, and Spendabit shows you the products and where you can buy it. You click on the product, and it actually takes you to that merchant. So you can search for any of the books from Free Press Publications. There's also a bunch of items from Overstock.com and thousands of other merchants. And if you are a merchant, you need to contact spendabit.co about some merchant suite options that they have that more easily convert, or not convert, but pull in your products. So when you post new products, it'll pull those things in. And then they wind up getting listed with millions of other products from thousands of companies at spendabit.co. So back to the article here from Breitbart. Cadell, that's the pollster who sharpened his teeth as a political consultant and pollster for Jimmy Carter in 1976, has developed a reputation for being a straight-shooting analyst, often criticized by his own party for predicting negative outcomes for the Democrats. His latest poll shows that Republican voters are reaching a tipping point and may have had enough of GOP lawmakers' feckless leadership and constant submission to President Obama's policies. A frequent guest on the Breitbart News Sunday Sirius XM Patriot radio program, Cadell said that he will be releasing a new survey of 600 Republican identifiers or independents who voted Republican in November. In what Cadell refers to as a stunner, only 16% want both Boehner and Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell to be their leaders. Moreover, according to the survey, 2/3 agreed with the statement, John Boehner has been inefficient in opposing Obama. Another stunner for Cadell was when voters were asked, is John Boehner for average Americans in his heart rather than for special interest? 44% said yes, 43% said no. And after reading this question, I have to say that the only way anyone other than John Boehner can answer this question is, I don't know. And the reason is because wording of questions is very important. It does not say, do you think that John Boehner is for average Americans or special interest? It says, is John Boehner for average Americans in his heart? Well, nobody other than John Boehner knows what John Boehner believes in his heart. So the only way to really answer this is, I don't know. Now, if you ask me what I think, do I think that John Boehner supports average Americans or special interest? I'll say special interest. But that was not the question. Continuing on here, Cadell says, we're talking about the base. These are not independents that lean Democrat, and these are not Democrats. They're Republicans or independents who lean Republican. Breitbart's chairman asked Cadell, does the math show that there could be an uprising, and could the GOP go the way of the Whig Party? The Whigs elected 2 presidents in the mid-19th century, and at one time claimed Abraham Lincoln as a member, but quickly disappeared from the political landscape over slavery issues. Cadell answered by reminding Bannon, that the estimate that 1/4 to 1/3 are hanging on by a thread is a conservative estimate, explaining, quote, the GOP leadership, the lawyers, the lobbyists, the consultant class of the Republican Party, and all the big donors don't understand that these people are angry. They are saying that John Boehner doesn't care about them, and all he cares about is special interest. I've never seen anything like this in the base of a party, and that is why the analogy to the Whigs is not far-fetched. So, if the Republican Party, as a institution, went the way of the Whig Party, then yes, I could see between 1/3 and 1/4 or whatever, I could see them going to another party. But until that happens, I do not think that Republicans en masse will leave the Republican Party. And the reason is Hillary. And not just Hillary, but just Democrats. So, like I'm picturing in my mind the guy from Aliens with like the kind of weird hair, George Tsoukalos, where, like the caption, you've seen the meme, and the caption is always aliens. Yeah, so like just imagine like a John Boehner face or Rand Paul or some other Republican guy with that same sort of hair and just Democrats. Like that's why Republicans will never leave the Republican Party, is because they are so afraid of Democrats, and it's partly because of what is titled The Myth That Will Not Die. And what is the myth that will not die? Well, that myth is that Ross Perot cost George H.W. Bush the 1992 presidential election. And it is not true. It was not true in 1992. It is not true today. It will not be true in the future, no matter how many times people say it. Well, what's the quote? Lie does not become truth no matter how many people believe it, and a truth does not become a lie no matter how few people believe it. But people keep saying that, like, oh, well, if you vote for fill-in-the-blank candidate, then you're voting for fill-in-the-blank major party candidate. And I've heard it numerous times. If you vote for the Libertarians, then the Democrat wins. But yet the Democrats tell me the complete opposite. If you vote for the Libertarian, then the Republican's going to win. No, if I vote for the Libertarian, that's me voting for the Libertarian. If I write in none of the above, that's me writing in none of the above. A vote for none of the above is not a vote for either the Republican or the Democrat. It's me saying I don't want either one of these a-holes to get elected. That's what a vote for none of the above is. So let me go now to an article, and this is actually from 2011, but it's very relevant, and it completely explains why Republicans will never leave the Republican Party and why Democrats will never leave the Democratic Party. It's because of this myth, the myth that will not die. The article, it comes from Salon.com, and the writer here says, about the only thing I can say about this piece from Greg Easterbrook is that I'm absolutely floored by the ignorance it conveys. Easterbrook's premise is that a third-party spoiler running a vanity campaign could cost, well, he says here Obama the election, but it doesn't really matter who. And I'll get into the article when we come back.
Why do they hate us? Is libertarianism compatible with Islam? Davi Barker answers these questions and more in Voluntary Islam and Other Essays. He advances the voluntarist cause with analysis of the confluence of values between Islam and libertarianism, as well as contemporary movements from the Tea Party to the Arab Spring. Voluntary Islam by Davi Barker is available from Amazon.com and all major bookstores.
It is the year 91,001 BCE. Witness humanity's origins in Hyperchronius, a classic role-playing game for Windows PCs, with a story like no other game before. A liberty-oriented experience that is not to be missed. Go to zog.ninja to get your copy of Hyperchronius today. Use the code FPP to get $1 off. Hyperchronius, zog.ninja, code FPP.
Are you tired of governments murdering people around the world? Stop using their money. There is an alternative. Bitcoin is a stateless, free market, non-political currency. Bitcoin cannot be inflated or controlled by any government. By using their money, you are helping the state. Stop doing it. You have an incredible alternative available now. Learn it, use it, spread it. Get started with Bitcoin at weusecoins.com. That's weusecoins.com.
You're listening to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio, online at fppradio.com.
So the names have changed for 2015, 2016, but only because, the names have changed. So in the article here, he says that a strong third-party or vanity candidate running in 2012 could cost Obama the election, but let's just say Hillary or Donald Trump. It doesn't really matter. A strong third party, and this is the claim, a strong third party will cost major candidate fill in the blank the election, which is absolutely not true. But again, I'll try not to change what's written here too much. So again, Easterbrook's premise is that a third-party spoiler running a vanity campaign in 2012 could cost Barack Obama the election, siphoning off Republican-friendly voters who are turned off by their party's nominee, but reluctant to back the president. Specifically, he points to Michael Bloomberg and advises Obama to appoint him to something important as soon as possible, before the New York billionaire throws the election to Mitt or Tim or whoever. I'd say this is going too far. I've argued, and this is one of those weirdly worded sentences, so I'll try to make it make sense here. It says, I'd say this is going too far. I've argued that Bloomberg could, if certain economic and political conditions are met, win a decent share of the vote as an independent. And instead of Bloomberg here, just imagine that I'm saying Trump, because there's the claim that Trump might bolt from the Republican Party and then run as an independent. And hell, he, even during the debate last week, raised his hand when the question was, raise your hand if you are not willing to say right now today that you will not run as an independent and that you are willing to support whoever winds up being the Republican nominee. Trump raised his hand and said, I'm not supporting anybody that I don't respect and that I don't believe in. So, no, I'm not going to say that I won't do it, unless, of course, I'm the nominee. So I'm just going to pretend here that Bloomberg is Trump. So I've argued that Trump could, if certain economic and political conditions are met, win a decent share of the vote as an independent, but that his spoiler potential is overrated and he'd have no realistic chance of victory. But that's not the troublesome part. What I have a problem with is this. And the person writing this article now quotes from the article that he mentions by Greg Easterbrook. Now factor in spoiler candidates who run for reasons of ego, knowing they can't win. Carter lost because the third-party vanity candidate, John Anderson, siphoned off liberal voters. The elder Bush lost because the third-party vanity candidate, Ross Perot, siphoned off conservative voters. Plus, in 2000, a third-party vanity candidate Ralph Nader threw the election to the younger Bush, away from Al Gore, who prevailed in the popular vote. That's 3 in the last 7 presidential elections swung by third-party candidates who were in the race mainly as an act of self-flattery. We live, after all, in an era in which personal promotion often trumps substance. And it's absolutely not true. And the writer here from Salon gets into that and explains why it's not true. Says this is completely and thoroughly untrue, and it's not even remotely ambiguous. Let's take them one at a time. Jimmy Carter lost in 1980 because John Anderson? Well, that was the Carter campaign's fear throughout the summer and fall of 1980, and the Reagan campaign's hope. It's why Carter refused to participate in any debate in which Anderson, a liberal House Republican who had bolted the GOP after briefly seeking its nomination in order to wage a third-party campaign, participated. But it's not at all how things played out. Now, yes, it is true that Carter refused to be in the debate. There was one debate that had Reagan and Anderson, and one debate that had Reagan and Carter. Carter and Anderson never debated one another at all in 1980. The article here continues. It says, when Anderson began his independent bid in the spring of 1980, he reached as high as 24% in national surveys, but he had trouble raising money and steadily lost ground in the ensuing months. By September, his support was in the mid-teens, and it declined further after he and Reagan engaged in a nationally televised one-on-one debate. It was around that time that pollsters began to realize that the assumptions about Anderson's effect were wrong. Sure, it seemed logical to assume that his message would resonate primarily with Carter voters, but at a practical level, he was simply another option for frustrated voters who had already decided not to back Carter for another term. Polls found Anderson voters nearly as likely to list Reagan as their second choice as Carter. The election was fundamentally a referendum on Carter, and with unemployment, inflation, interest rates, and gas prices soaring, and with national confidence sagging, thanks to a protracted hostage crisis, the majority of Americans were set to toss the president out. The only question was which of his opponents they would support. This explains why Anderson's support dropped so steadily as the election neared. Anti-Carter voters came to fear wasting their votes on Anderson and maybe even helping Carter score a victory. And then they go into the election results from 1980 and further explained how Anderson did not help Reagan win. Next up, Ross Perot and 1992. Easterbrook argues that George H.W. Bush lost because the Texas billionaire siphoned off conservative voters. False. And I cannot say this enough. It is not true. It was not true then. It will not be true in the future, no matter what people say. Ross Perot did not cost George H.W. Bush the election. The endurance of this particular myth, and this is much more often repeated than the John Anderson 1980 myth, because this one fits the Republican narrative a little bit more. Ross Perot, in 1992, the endurance of this particular myth, regular readers will recognize, is particularly bothersome, and I've written about it several times. Easterbrook is hardly the only one who's still pushing it. I can't tell you how many times I've heard someone matter-of-factly make this claim in the past few years. Generally, it's from a conservative who likes to pretend that Bill Clinton's 1992 victory was a fluke, but there are liberals who still fall for it too. Instead of recounting all of the details of the 1992 race here, I'll simply refer you to one of my previous posts on the subject, and he links over to another post. Here's the Cliff Notes version. Goes like this. Economic anxiety was high, causing Bush's poll numbers to drop to poisonous levels by the fall of 1992. He was not an incumbent who, on paper, should have won re-election. Not a single public opinion poll from the middle of July, when Perot dropped out of the race, through the end of September, when Perot returned to the race, gave Bush a lead over Clinton, not even in the immediate wake of the August 1992 GOP convention. In fact, Clinton's average lead in this period was double digits, and the race was not tightening at the time that Perot jumped back in. And then there's exit polling that showed that Perot pulled almost evenly from Democrats and Republicans, with a plurality saying, yeah, I wouldn't have voted at all. Hey, this is Peace, Love, Liberty Radio. Don't forget the Ask Me Anything on Wednesday. Send those questions AMA at FPPradio.com.